Oi, oi, right, how's it going? I'm Grant, your you. This is the Doodle Review, and you're watching a new series I'm calling TVI. It's a segment I'm going to return to maybe every now and again to examine music in film and TV. And to be honest, I've created this series truly because I just want to talk about this one specific topic, which is just how friggin' great the music in the show The Bear is. I did a deep dive on series 1 some time ago. It's linked below, so check it out if you're a fan. The video is back in the kind of lo-fi days of this channel, quality-wise, but I think I make some fairly interesting observations. I don't know. Have a punt, you tell me. Anyway, Season 3 of this show has just come out, and before I can jump into that, for continuity's sake and my own sanity, I need to make sure that I did a deep dive on the music of the second season first. And I cannot imagine that you found yourself here if you don't watch The Bear, but two things, if that's the case. I'll probably spoil some plot points for you if you are planning to watch it at some point, so you've been warned. And if you're not planning to, but for some reason you're still watching this video, the basic premise of the show is that it follows the journey of a highly trained and highly skilled chef, Carmine or Carmi, who returns to Chicago in the wake of his brother's suicide to run the restaurant that his brother owned. At the end of the first season, he kind of got the restaurant, which was a traditional Chicago beef sandwich fast food joint. He kind of got it back on its feet before having a massive breakdown, and he then kind of stumbled on a large amount of money and decides to shut down the restaurant, renovate and reopen it as like a high-end fine dining sort of establishment, which is where we pick the story back up at the start of the second series. And after Succession, this show has really come to be one of the best shows on TV for me in terms of acting, characters, writing and visuals. A lot of the show has that vibe of other great FX series like Atlanta and Dave, and a huge part of what makes that work for me is the music. The show utilizes very little original score and instead stacks great needle drop on great needle drop on great needle drop, a litany of well-known tracks and hidden gems that really add to the tone and texture of the show and often kind of complement the dialogue and the actions that are happening on screen. We're going to go episode by episode. Let's get into it. So each episode, I'm going to give you a little list down the side. I can't do the mirror image thing, so whichever side it is. But I'll probably just pick out one of the songs that are listed there as the one that I'm going to dive into. And the first one will be the first needle drop in the first episode, Beef. The song is The Show Goes On by Bruce Hornsby and The Range. It was released in 1988 on his Scenes from the South Side album. It's an artist that I know honestly nothing about in truth, and not necessarily a song I'm taking away as like a banger that I'm going to return to, but it worked beautifully during this somewhat somber reintroduction to the city of Chicago after we see the character of Marcus checking in on his mother who's clearly in poor health. The style of this track rather than the track itself is something that I kind of want to comment on. And it's something that I mentioned during my commentary of season 1 as well. The Show Goes On is one of many tracks used in this kind of adult contemporary mid-tempo late 80s early 90s soft rock vibe, and this is one of kind of the three main color palettes the showrunners return to repeatedly during the show. There's these 80s 90s soft rock pieces, there's like alternative and indie rock from the 90s into the 2000s, and then there's like this dusty funk and soul that they use, and there's other styles that they dip into. Nothing's really off limits, which is part of the greatness, but those are like the big kind of pillars that create the sonic identity of the show. The usage of the soft rock is something that just intrigues me the most, because these are the most quote unquote uncool tracks, though there's some bangers there for sure. But despite that, something about the emotional earnestness of these songs, I think, speaks to the underlying emotions that kind of churn under the surface of all of the characters in the show. I don't know how much there is to this, or if it's just my own theory, but I feel like these songs are weaved throughout the series because, one, there may be the type of tunes that you might find in a kitchen, just on a radio station that plays stuff that's kind of palatable more or less for everyone, which is important when you have many different people of different tastes working together. And two, Given the age of the core characters, who are presumably in their kind of mid to late 30s, these late 80s, early 90s songs probably represent some sort of nostalgia and longing for simpler times they might associate with their earliest childhood, before they were maybe fully conscious of all the fuckery in their family situation, which we come to learn about. And perhaps it's that second point that is why it resonates so well with audiences as well. Like I'm a little bit younger, but in that sort of ballpark. And, you know, Phil Collins, Crowded House, Lindsey Buckingham, they're all artists I remember my mum jamming to on long drives, you know, my earliest childhood memories. Thankfully, much more stable childhood than our characters here. But the nostalgia, it's plenty the same. Before we bow out of episode 1, we've also got to give it up for that cheeky nod to New Noise by Refused, the absolutely iconic needle drop from the very first episode of the show that it kind of used went to signify when Kami is like shifting into action. Episode 2, and again, the first needle drop on the list, Fine Young Cannibals, more upbeat than show goes on, but exactly the same aesthetic, that 90s soft rock. A naughty little banger, that one though. The track we should really talk about here is Strange Currencies by REM off their Monster album from 1994. This is the theme we're introduced to for the relationship between Kami and Claire, who reconnect in this episode. Their relationship's probably my least favourite part of the series, but it's necessary to explore just how I think damaged Kami is as a character. Nevertheless, I love the use of this song to underpin the emotional tone of their relationship on screen. It's a reference point we come back to many times in many of their scenes over the course of the series, and while it clearly has a romantic tone, just instrumentally, you know, it's a slow alternative rock ballad which fits within the show's overall aesthetic. If I was to overthink things slightly, I would say that the lyrics also give an indication of where the relationship is going to go. If you examine the pretty minimal lyrics sang by the enigmatic Michael Stipe here, to me, they give an impression of a bit of a selfish love. They speak to, this is like how you make me feel, and I want to feel this way, and you will be mine. I don't necessarily think this is intentional by the showrunners. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. Probably it's me overanalyzing and trying to fit things into a narrative, but if you'll indulge me, I think the whole arc of the Kami and Claire relationship is that Kami's character can't seem to get the balance right between being in a relationship and focused on the restaurant. He's kind of acting selfishly on both sides. When he falls into things with Claire, he's letting details slide in the run up to the restaurant opening, and he's letting people close to him down, like Sid, but also and coming to back by himself. And at the same time, at the end of the series, he goes completely the opposite way, thinking he's only a genius chef because he doesn't let anybody in and he doesn't need anyone else. I don't know. Might be something to it, might not. Episode 3, Sunday. Here, sometimes the songs just used have a very literal meaning. You know, towards the start of this episode, we hear the song by Squeeze called Goodbye Girl. It's a kitschy kind of new wave track that doesn't really fit into those three main stylistic buckets, but works nonetheless. And here, the lyrics entitled Goodbye Girl soundtrack pretty much what's going on. Richie is literally dropping his daughter off with his mother, who he's separated from. Ibra is opting not to show up, effectively making the decision to say goodbye to culinary school and maybe his job if they won't have him back. And Kami sets up a meeting with Sid that he ultimately bails on, and the empty commitment is itself, I guess, basically a goodbye. Elsewhere, there are just some great pulls to soundtrack Sid's solo journey of inspiration, which accompanies some of the best food porn in the entire series. Episode 4 doesn't offer a huge amount for me to go deep on. I wasn't able to discern, too many layers in the track choices here, but nonetheless, beautiful music. Lindsey Buckingham's Holiday Road naturally plays while Marcus journeys to Copenhagen and is another entry in that kind of soft rock canon that I keep talking about. But I also love the use of Mulatu Astaki's piece Tizata, which soundtracks his mini kind of sightseeing expedition around Copenhagen. Pop, episode 5, gives us a bit of everything the soundtrack is known for. We get some gritty indie tunes by The Replacements, who kind of bookend the episode, and some soft rock in the form of Neil Finn of Crowded House. But my favourite has to be the karaoke scene with Tina. So during this scene, Tina has been invited to a night out with some of the other students from the culinary school. And as the night progresses, karaoke ensues and the mic kind of goes to Tina. And as a viewer, initially we don't quite know how she's going to respond. Tina is fierce in her comfort zone, but seems a little timid among the younger students she doesn't know very well. Nevertheless, she steps up, which in itself I think continues to reveal something about her character, that she might ultimately be a little less confident in this setting, but she still has that trait at her core. She then proceeds to sing a song called Before the Next Teardrop Falls by Freddie Fender. It's a slow and emotive song, and although the lyrics are in Spanish, as the camera kind of holds on her face and we see the emotion behind her eyes, we're shown, not told, that there's a story there. There's some pain there, and yes, some of it is potentially to do with her concerns for her friend Ebru, but we also know there's probably more that sits in her past, and that's what this show is great at. As with a lot of my favourites, it's all about show and not tell. I'm sure we probably will get some Tina backstory at some point, but if we don't, these little moments are fine. It's an emotionally affecting scene without needing a 20-minute flashback to spell out how you should be feeling for this character. Episode 6 is the big one in the series. It's where all of the family trauma that's been hinted at over the first series and up to now through the second is given real tangible form. We see it for ourselves. It shows us a flashback to what is supposed to be a Christmas family tradition in the Bazzato household, the Feast of the Seven Fishes, and it's a total car crash, quite literally. Music kind of takes a back seat in this episode, but even in its diminished role, it amps up or accentuates certain moments and certain emotions at certain points. Being a Christmas episode, obviously a lot of festive music is used, and rather than being a true needle drop, it's more played as if we're just hearing what's on the stereo in the house. I think my favourite music moment though is in the scene between Carmi and his mother Donna, played amazingly by Jamie Lee Curtis. I think one of her best dramatic performances ever. In this scene, they are in the kitchen and Donna is already kind of breaking under the pressure of cooking for everyone but not accepting any help. And in the background is George Harrison's Got My Mind Set on You. And there's just something about the repetition of this song while Carmi and his mother are going back and forth, the egg timer going off multiple times, each time seemingly more abrasive. And it just adds to this rising tension. At one point, the chorus is heard so many times, I actually wondered if the music supervisors here had looped it more than we would hear in the original track. Just really effective use of music there. As I say, it's in this episode, it's truly about the performances that are the star. There always are, but more so in this one. But great choices nonetheless. It's pretty cool that they picked a Weezer song, a Weezer Christmas song over the end credits as well. Forks, episode 7, is all about Richie, and there's really only one piece of music we can talk about here, and it's Taylor Swift's Love Story. Now, before we get there, it has to be said that this is probably one of my favourite episodes in the entire series. It's not often that a TV show, you can develop a character so much in one episode and it feel organic, but they really achieve that here. Richie's character has been lost for a long time in the series, can't seem to find his place, and in this episode he's forced to spend a week at one of the best restaurants in the world, literally cleaning forks. Initially resistant, he slowly becomes enlightened to how the military style attention to detail is vital to creating the restaurant experience they're going for, and in that he kind of finds his purpose. And it's a huge moment for him, and then after just one great day where he really proves himself to that team, we cut to him driving back from work absolutely ecstatic, and Taylor Swift's Love Story is booming on the stereo and he's there singing along. And again, we're not shown this, but as a viewer you can kind of figure that his daughter has probably made him sit through this song hundreds of times reluctantly, and yet here he's just absolutely swept up in it. And I think what really works about this is the show has previously dropped a number of hints that Taylor Swift is important to Richie's daughter. He's shown at a couple of points asking Uncle Jimmy a couple of times about getting hold of tickets for a concert in previous episodes. And I think even if you're not a Swift fan, it's hard not to be somewhat moved by this great and well-earned character moment. It's just really well done, probably one of the best moments in the second series to my mind. Episode 8 is again one where I'm not gleaning any huge thematic significance from the music choices, but I do like how Pretenders Stop Your Sobbing is played over the scene where Carmi is kind of telling Marcus and Sid about the Christmas incident and his idea for the cannolis. Episode 9, Omelette, is one with a number of great moments. It opens with a love scene between Claire and Carmi, and the soundtrack to this is The Day the World Went Away by 9 Inch Nails. Now, I'm a Trent Reznor 9 Inch Nails stan, so anytime they pop up, it's great. And here, using the still version of this track is instrumentally a great backdrop to this sort of scene. But of course, the title of the track, kind of just makes perfect sense. Without getting cringe about it, they're losing themselves and everything else to each other in that moment. And so The Day the World Went Away makes sense. We also get a remixed version of Strange Currencies, the Claire and Carmi theme. When Carmine's kind of anxiety is ramping up ahead of the restaurant opening, we're seeing lots of images of Claire with these intrusive moments of his traumatic Christmas experience, of Mikey, his brother, and the backdrop is the theme, Strange Currencies, but it's a remixed version where Michael Stipe's vocal is all reversed and messed up. So it's a great way of audibly representing this conflict while playing into the theme. New Noise makes a necessary appearance as they kick into action ahead of the opening, and then boom, AC/DC's If You Want Blood is the perfect backdrop as the team literally are pumped and they're ready to open the doors. And if this series wasn't intent on devastating you emotionally, that would be the end of season 2. But instead, we have the next episode. Episode 10 is called The Bear. It's the season finale, and it is a tour de force of needle drops. They open with this great piece of score. It's got all of these fast violins, which paints a picture of urgency, of sophistication, and of control, although the cracks are already starting to show a little bit as it's kind of like running ahead of them. They do a really cool thing where they transition between this score in the kitchen and then what's actually on the music system in the restaurant as you follow the servers out there. The great thing about the show is that they kind of create the sense that the music they use is aligned to the characters in the show. They don't ever say this, but I feel like Richie and Carmi kind of like this kind of music, and so it makes sense that as Richie's going between the tables, we'd hear Liz Phair's Supernova, and late further on, Valoria by the Pixies, and that kind of aligns to the level of tension which has risen at that point. In a great callback to the breakdown that was the crescendo of season 1, they drop Wilco's chaotic spiders over the chaos that then starts to unfold again in the kitchen. And another callback to season 1, they use Pearl Jam's banger Animal when Richie steps up to the plate and brings the kitchen kind of back under control after that chaos. All of this is just a warm-up, though, for the unbelievably heart-wrenching centerpiece of the episode, which is once again Jamie Lee Curtis's performance as Donna. She's been invited to Friends and Family Night, and initially it looks like she's not showing up, but Sugar's husband, Pete, spots her outside of the restaurant, and what follows is one of the most painful, emotionally speaking, sequences in the show, where essentially she just refuses to go in because she doesn't believe that she deserves to see what her kids have accomplished. And throughout this, we hear the 9 Inch Nails track, Hope We Can Again. And it's an interesting story on this one, just a bit of background about this song. It comes from the Ghosts albums, volume 5 and 6, which were released as a surprise for fans during the pandemic. However, the word is that it was actually a Trent Reznor, Atticus Ross score that they'd worked up for a movie called Woman in the Window. However, that was a project that they ultimately left due to creative differences. So under the Nails banner, Reznor had already kind of set a precedent for instrumental music with the Ghosts project from 2008, something that at the time seemed like it would be a reoccurring project, but we actually didn't get any more of until this pandemic released sequel collection. The piece Hope We Can Again reminds me of much earlier Reznor compositions released on the often overlooked Still project. There's a couple of tracks on there, one called Leaving Hope and the other called The Persistence of Loss, both of which use these similar atmospherics to create this very icy soundscape, along with these pulsing bass tones that almost sound like waves washing over the melody. And just over the top, we have this delicate little melody, this spark of hope. As it plays in the scene, this melody I think really echoes Donna's maybe own spark of love and affection. It's there, you can see it or hear it, but for the most part it's just trying to stay afloat amongst this swelling darkness that's constantly threatening to overwhelm it and snuff it out. It's a scene that I can honestly kind of well up a little bit thinking about. It's just beautifully written, shot, acted and scored. It's truly one of the highlights of the whole series for me, musical and otherwise. And that's it. That's the whole series. If you made it this far, let me know what you think. Are you into this show? What are your favourite musical moments? Give me a shout. Let me know. Subscribe, share some thoughts, show some love, or just have some abuse in the comments. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers, mate. Mind how you go. Take care now. Bye.